Accelerated passage for the Executive Committee Functions Bill. Clerk, please read the motion.
That the Executive Committee Functions Bill proceed under the accelerated passage procedure.
I call Junior Minister Gordon Lyons to formally move the motion.
I beg to move.
Thank you, Minister. The Business Committee has agreed that there would be no time limit on this debate, and I call Junior Minister to open the debate on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I welcome the opportunity to address the Assembly on this motion. Even with a short bill such as this, it would be our strong preference to have it progress through the conventional procedure, including a full committee stage, which would permit the detailed scrutiny of its clauses. The bill is intended to address the implications for ministerial and executive decision-making of the judgments of the Court in the case brought by Mr Colin Buick against a decision of the Department for Infrastructure to grant planning permission for a waste incinerator. It is necessary to clarify the circumstances in which a minister is required to refer a matter to the Executive Committee where that matter may be cross-cutting or significant or controversial. In explaining to the Assembly, in accordance with Standing Order 42.3, why accelerated passage is being sought and the consequences of it not being granted, it might appear to members that this is a somewhat academic issue. However, if it is not resolved quickly, it has important consequences for the economy and particularly our pressing need to promote investment in our infrastructure. The Assembly will be aware that a cross-cutting matter is defined as one which cuts across the responsibilities of two or more ministers. Planning decisions had, up to then, been regarded as solely the preserve of the relevant minister, on the basis that, though of interest to other ministers, such decisions did not cut across their statutory responsibilities. The Court, however, defined the planning decision in question as a cross-cutting matter by elating the concepts of responsibility and interest, and therefore potentially making all planning decisions subject to agreement by the Executive Committee and effectively making it the relevant authority rather than the Minister. The Executive has agreed that this is not an appropriate position, but to ignore the Court's judgment would risk opening up planning decisions to legal challenge simply on the basis that they had not been agreed by the Executive. Such a situation would have profound implications for a number of significant planning decisions which are expected during the remainder of this year and could lead to significant investment and employment opportunities being deferred or lost. We believe that this vulnerability can be quickly and simply rectified by means of the bill before us today. In accordance with Standing Order 42.3, the First Minister and Deputy First Minister appeared before the Committee for the Executive Office to explain the purpose of the bill and the need for accelerated passage. They are grateful to the Committee for its support and would therefore also seek the support of the Assembly in approving this motion. Thank you.
Very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I am pleased to speak to this motion on behalf of the Committee of the Executive Office. On the 23rd of June, the Committee for the Executive Office received notification from the First Minister and Deputy First Minister that they intended to introduce an Executive Committee Functions Bill and seek the Assembly's support for accelerated passage. The Committee didn't consider the matter at its meeting on the 24th of June, as an explanation was not provided as to why accelerated passage was needed and what the consequences would be if it wasn't granted. However, in compliance with Standing Order 42.3, the First Minister and Deputy First Minister provided that explanation to the Committee at its meeting on the 1st of July. The Committee understands that the urgency around this piece of legislation is to remedy the situation whereby planning decisions that could be open to challenge because of the judgment in the case of Buick cannot be made by the Minister for Infrastructure. Rather, they need to be approved by the Executive Committee. The Minister has already provided significant detail on this issue, and I don't intend to repeat it. However, I do want to point out that in deciding whether to support the request for accelerated passage, the Committee took into consideration the current COVID-19 pandemic and the need to regenerate the economy as quickly as possible, especially as we move into the recovery phase. Members recognise that infrastructure projects are absolutely key to recovery and that any further or unnecessary delays in planning decisions being made could have serious implications for our economy. It was the Committee's firm view that decisions on those planning applications that are currently sitting on the Infrastructure Minister's desk need to be made as soon as possible. This legislation would allow that to happen and needs to be progressed with urgency. The Committee for the Executive Office therefore supports the motion and the bill proceeds under accelerated passage procedure. As an SDLP MLA, I want to welcome this accelerated passage as it will allow for the quickest possible introduction of the bill, which will help to make for a smoother passage for decisions that may come down the line. This bill allows a lot of major decisions that are currently in, for example, the planning system, to be taken quickly, and this will provide a positive boost for the economy of the North and allow major projects that are in the system to be delivered on the ground faster, as that allows for the potential for jobs in our construction industry, and with new factories and facilities, more jobs in all of our communities. I appreciate that the drafters of the Northern Ireland Act may not have understood every nuance of the implications of their bill, but often it is in practice where the best understanding of these matters comes from, and I appreciate that that is the case here. I welcome that we will not be delaying the introduction of this bill by a lengthy committee process, and look forward to the further considerations of this bill later today and its swift introduction. Thank you.
I call Christopher Stelford.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to associate myself with the comments that have been made by the Chairman of the Committee. Paragraph 14 of the memorandum that's been circulated in relation to the content of this bill clearly states its purpose. It will clarify the decision-making functions of the Department for Infrastructure and its Minister under the Planning Act NI 2011, and regulations under that Act are the responsibility of that Department and Minister, with the exception of planning policy formulated under Section 1 of the Act, are to be excluded from the requirement under Section 20 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998 for referral to the Executive Committee. The explanation is plain, and the reasons why we need to do it are plain also. We all know that as a consequence of putting our economy into cold storage for 4 months now, there is going to be serious economic slowdown and potentially a devastating recession. Government has at its disposal the potential to help and assist in getting out of that recession and in stimulating, if I was in the chair, you'd be getting reprimanded for that, and in stimulating, so I'll just reprimand you without being in the chair, and in stimulating economic growth. And one of the ways in which the government can do that is to ensure that planning processes around major infrastructure projects are sped up. And I believe the content of this bill gives the government a flexible tool whereby jobs and opportunities can be provided for our people who will be struggling with the economic consequences of the situation that we're in presently. Yes, I'll give way.
I appreciate the member giving way, because obviously this is a necessary requirement in relation to what happened in the courts. However, members need to also take into account what the Audit Office has said in relation to the 700 million overspend, and in that particular Audit Office report that some members in this House seem to forget actually has been made public, it makes very clear reference to the problems in the planning service. My concern is that while this is a necessary piece of legislation that has to be done to respond to what happened, Mr Chair, to what happened in the court, I think that we also need to take into effect that if we want progress, it has to be on the basis of a planning service that's fit for purpose.
I absolutely agree with the member, and speaking as a member for South Belfast, a constituency where if you stand still long enough they'll build a house on top of you, I understand why people are naturally concerned about the way the planning processes work, because what I have seen in my constituency, certainly at a housing level, with issues like garden grabbing and huge apartment blocks going in everywhere, is of concern in terms of how it works. But there's also the issues around major economic projects that can stimulate job growth and job creation. And in those instances, It has taken far, far too long for businesses to get through the planning process. We do need to recalibrate how planning works in this country. There's no question of that. And I think that in this small way, if it makes it easier to get decisions made that will create jobs, that can only be a good thing. And therefore, I support the accelerated passage of this bill.
I call Pat Sheehan.
I've got a last Corla, and I rise to support the introduction of this bill. It's a sensible and effective approach to deal with the uncertainty that was introduced by the Buick judgment, the uncertainty that's introduced into the planning process. And the bill allows the Minister for Infrastructure the autonomy required to work effectively in the planning process. Not to introduce this bill would leave the Minister open for legal challenges on decisions that she might make, and it would also mean that planning decisions would have to go into the executive, and we all know that that would create greater bureaucracy, more prolonged delays, and the jamming up of the whole planning process. And such delays would have, as has been mentioned by all the speakers, a detrimental impact on our economy. And as we come out of this crisis of COVID-19, the economy coming out of cold storage, there's a need to get things moving and moving quickly. There's a need for agility and being nimble within that planning process, and to get the especially the infrastructure sector up and running again. I support the decision to give accelerated passage to the bill, which will allow the Minister to deal with the growing pile of planning applications in her entry.
I call Claire Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And this is an important piece that we're discussing today, and I can't support the accelerated passage of this bill. And when I hear that the committee looked at this last week, I listened to that committee, and I have to point out that the committee spent a few minutes on this last week, and I need to believe that that's either good governance or good scrutiny measures. An accelerated passage should not be used to rush this through, because without proper scrutiny, we can't get the full implication of this. And to try and use a piece, I mean, this was a judicial review that was taken, and a judge's ruling while we had no assembly, while we had no executive, while we had no ministers, and things were forced into our courts. And since we have been back, we have been asked on numerous occasions to accelerate pieces of legislation or legislative consent motions without proper scrutiny. And we're continually hearing from a lot of our committees that we don't have the proper time to look at this. And I know in my committee, for example, we've been looking at the Environment Bill, Fisheries Bill, Agricultural Bills, all coming through. And many stakeholders and evidence sessions were being heard or being told that there are many problems and many issues with these bills, but yet we are passing either consent for either accelerated passage or for legislative consent. I can't also see, I mean, I hope the legislation will not be used to make decisions in planning that have a detrimental impact on the environment, for example, just in order to get our economy back on its feet. Planning applications have environmental impacts, as do capital projects, but no expediency should be used just to keep the show on the road. And there are, let's not forget, many decisions that our executive and our ministers already have the ability to make, but continue to delay on. And a recent example, we all know that Northern Ireland needs an energy strategy. We all know that the sector are waiting for targets for renewable electricity, for example, and yet after consultation and after many responses to that, we're hearing now that the Minister says that the strategy won't be produced until November next year. So I don't see how accelerated passage will help us have any confidence that planning decisions will be made in any better way. And absolutely, as Mr Stalford has said, there are many issues with the planning system at the minute, but I don't think that this will do anything to instil faith or confidence in ministerial decision making. Thank you.
I now call on the Junior Minister Gordon Lyons to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion. Sorry, just an indication. Andrew Muir, would you like to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Alliance Party will vote for the bill before us today. The Buick judgment makes this bill necessary to allow the Minister for Infrastructure to decide on regionally significant planning applications, as has been outlined by some other speakers. And I would declare at the outset that I was previously a councillor on Ards and North Down Borough Council. The Alliance Party will support the bill in the context that our planning statistics in Northern Ireland do make for very grim reading, as other members have outlined. For context, the average length of time taken by councils last year to decide on major planning applications was 53 weeks, against a target of 30 weeks. The figures for regionally significant applications decided by the Department for Infrastructure and key to the motion here today are even worse. In the year to March 2020, regionally significant applications had an average processing time of 74 weeks, way over the 30-week target. Still, at least this was an improvement on the year before, where processing time was an unbelievable 261 weeks. Yes.
The member agree with me it is vitally important. No one wants to see accelerated passage, but at the end of the day, it's important that we have legislation that allows Northern Ireland to go forward and for our economy to recover as quickly as possible. We have nothing that puts Northern Ireland at a disadvantage to the rest of the United Kingdom, indeed the rest of Europe, in terms of getting that inward investment. And can I also make the point to the member, in terms of the judicial
would members address the chairs?
Would the member agree with me that judicial reviews are far too readily available and slow up the process in terms of development in Northern Ireland? And that is something which places Northern Ireland absolutely at a disadvantage when we're looking to develop our economy and build new homes for our people that are so much needed in our country.
Thank you, and thank the member for his intervention. We do need to look at why there's so many judicial reviews in Northern Ireland, and I think that's something that's going to have to be explored over the months ahead. And why is it so unique that so many judicial reviews are taken? Yes.
The member will be aware that the Northern Ireland Audit Office...
Would members again...
Apologies,
chairs,
Mr Chair.
Can be picked
I always like to look at the person that I'm speaking to. Okay, Mr Chair. And the issue is the Northern Ireland Audit Office will carry out next year two very important pieces of work, one into procurement and also one into planning. I think they're fundamental because they look at the issues that have really created massive problems for investment in Northern Ireland, and I welcome very much the fact that the Audit Office, Mr Chair, is taking that piece of work forward.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I agree. I think it's an important piece of work for it to be considered. I know the Public Accounts Committee, of which I am a member, is considering major capital projects, but this relates to that. And as I was going to say, anything that can speed up the pace of planning decisions in Northern Ireland is to be welcomed, and that's why we support the bill. At the end of last year, there were 38 regionally significant planning applications waiting for a decision by the Department of Infrastructure. 23 of those had been waiting longer than 2 years. The two oldest had been waiting 13 years each. 13 years. How can we attract investment that we so badly need if regionally significant planning applications are taking so long? This bill is welcome, but it must only be the start of a major shake-up of our planning system in Northern Ireland, and I recognise that this is largely an infrastructure issue, but the bill is presented here from the Executive Office. We must reform the pre-application discussion process to ensure that major issues are caught early and dealt with. We also need to ensure that statutory consultees are properly funded so that consultation deadlines are adhered to. Yes.
Thank the member for giving way. And would he agree with me that quite often is the case it's statutory consultations and the length of time it is taking for some, in particular, some government departments to come back, which is putting a huge strain on our planning service, both locally and I mentioned in the House, but for myself, one of the main culprits, and this can quite often be the Department of Infrastructure and that of Road Service, where we have a delay, a continuous delay, and a lack of a lack of even correspondence or engagement with whether that be the proposed development or developer or agent, but also elected members. If this can be addressed, surely again we could get to a situation which would certainly speed up the process.
And I would agree with you. I've dealt with a plan application in my time on council, which took, I think, nearly 2 years because of a statutory consultee messing around, frankly, and not coming back, and then coming back eventually with further queries. And this was for a business that was to be de-established and was delayed as a result of that. Furthermore, it is time for us to consider whether an independent planning authority, such as, for example, Ambord Planola in the south, with the authority to take regionally significant planning decisions, is something that we wish to consider here in Northern Ireland. Such a body could make informed, independent decisions on plan applications. Crucially, keeping politics out of planning decisions, it could lead to more timely decision-making that we so badly need. All of this should be considered as part of the forthcoming review of the 2011 Planning Act, which the Minister has promised, the Infrastructure Minister has promised to bring forward soon. As a member of the Infrastructure Committee, I look forward to working constructively with the Minister on that issue. Finally, in closing, Mr Deputy Speaker, I would be grateful if the junior ministers could outline the timetable for the remaining steps of this bill, assuming that it passes the second reading here today. I would disagree with Claire Bailey around the issue about accelerated passage. I feel that this issue does need to be progressed and we need this legislation in place ASAP. Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker.
And now I call the Junior Minister Gordon Lyons to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Who knew that a debate on accelerated passage could touch on so many issues in such a short period of time? I do want to thank the members that have contributed so far and have indicated their support. I would just pick up on the comment that Claire Bailey made. This bill does not affect the integrity of the planning process or the quality of decisions taken. Rather, it is about who should take that decision, whether the Infrastructure Minister can act alone or whether she needs to take it to the Executive Committee. So I'm sure we'll hear more about this in the coming debate, but in terms of the motion for accelerated passage, I thank members for their support and I urge them to support the motion. I'll give way to Mr Alistair.
I haven't yet heard any explanation proffered as to why this necessary legislation, I do accept it's necessary, wasn't brought sooner. We've known about this for a very long time. Why is it in the last week here in Stormont that suddenly a bill is being brought when it could have gone through processes much earlier?
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I don't think that Mr Alistair was in for my earlier remarks when I first introduced this. I did set out why it is necessary. In terms of timescales, obviously we're trying to get this done before the summer recess as well, so that it can be put in place for then. Obviously, yes, we'd like to bring through legislation as soon as it is ready, but we've got to the stage now where we've got the bill and we're trying to make sure that we can get it through all its processes. I'll give way to Mr Stalford.
I sympathise with the point that the member for North Antrim makes, and I'm aware that the Speaker of the Assembly has written to the Executive to raise concerns about legislative scrutiny. However, I would say that when motions come forward to permit accelerated passage or to suspend standing orders in relation to a bill, the Assembly itself has the ability to control how that is done.
That's a factual point. This is the opportunity now for members to put on the record what they believe should happen in terms of accelerated passage, and I look forward to members supporting the motion. Thank you.
Members, before we proceed to the question, I would remind members that this motion requires cross-community support. The question is that the Executive Committee Functions Bill proceed under the accelerated passage procedure. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Clear the lobbies. The question will be put again in 3 minutes. And I would remind members that we should continue to uphold social distancing and that members who have proxy voting arrangements in place should not come into the chamber. Before I put the question, I would again remind members present that, if possible, it would be preferable if we could avoid a division. The question is that the Executive Committee Functions Bill proceed under the accelerated passage procedures, and that be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Do we have tellers? The following tellers have been appointed. Tellers for the ayes, Sinead Innes and Christopher Stelford. Tellers for the noes, Jerry Carroll and Claire Bailey. Before the Assembly divides, I want to remind you that, as per Standing Order 112, the Assembly currently has proxy voting arrangements in place. Members who have authorised another member to vote in their behalf are not entitled to vote in person and should not enter the lobbies. It is important that during any division that social distancing in the chamber continues to be observed. In order to facilitate this, I would ask the following. Any members in the chamber who are not due to vote in person should consider leaving the chamber until the division is concluded. Those members who wish to vote in the lobbies on the opposite side of the chamber to which they are sitting should leave the chamber via the nearest door and enter the relevant lobby via the rotunda. Those remaining members who are sitting closest to the lobby doors should enter the lobbies first. Any member who has voted may then wish to leave the chamber until the division has concluded. However, any member who needs to vote in both lobbies should not leave the chamber. I remind members of the need to be patient at all times, to follow the instructions of the lobby clerks, and to respect the need for social distancing. Clear the lobbies. The Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Order members. Clerk, please read the result.
83 members voted, of which 79 voted aye, 95.2%. 38 nationalists voted, of which 38 voted aye, 100%. 35 unionists voted, of which 34 voted aye, 97.1%. 10 others voted, of which 7 voted aye, 70%. The motion is carried by cross-community support.
Motion is carried. Motion is carried. Unfasten the doors. And I would just pause for a few moments to allow other members who may have left to come back into the chamber.